Exclusive interview with Network 18, the first that she is giving to a private channel after her budget speech. The markets have given her a huge thumbs up, with the Sensex bouncing 2,200 points. It is the highest bounce in absolute terms ever, and a 5% jump is the highest in 22 years. Let's go straight to her with our questions. Nirmala ji, it has been a really, really tough year for you, but I think you have every reason to smile today. As I was saying, the Sensex has really bounced 2,200 points. Did you really expect this, and how do you feel?
No, I still have not even seen what kind of reactions are coming up, because after the presenting of the budget, I'm moving from one to another in terms of meeting people and giving television and news media, print media interviews. So I've actually not followed what is the development either in the markets or anywhere else. I hope the intention of 2 or 3 major points which have come across in the budget is well understood and well received. And if it is being received, I'll be happy, because after all, we want the country to understand the intent of this government.
It has been a tough year. You know, you've presented this budget in the backdrop of a once-in-a-century pandemic, and also with a highly aggressive neighbor, external aggression from China. What were you really thinking about when you were framing this budget?
One thing was clear. If I had more resources to give, I would have given it to the people as much as we can. But we hadn't that kind of a comfort. We didn't have it then, we don't have it yet. We soon can hope to have it. And also the fact that even during the pandemic, the small amounts that we gave to some people only, not to very many, were partly also kept aside, and I don't blame anybody for it, kept aside, saved for probably rainy days, because the uncertainty is such. So the question of giving money to people so that immediately demand push will happen, and through that people will be expected to spend, also had a question with it, saying will they spend or will they keep it aside for rainy days. Also, spending will result in immediate demand increases, no doubt, possibly if they spend, but will it be a meaningful trigger for a virtuous cycle to be triggered off? Unless that spending happens in those sectors where the multiplier will work, there's no point in spending in areas which the multipliers are, where the multipliers are weak. That is why we have taken this route of qualitative expenditure, capex through infrastructure building, capex for health, so that you bring in such infrastructure and such facility for health, and there take an approach of holistic health, and then look at agriculture. And that is why we have gone through this route. So that is one side of the story, and the other, I certainly didn't want to fund this whole operation through taxation. By increasing tax, getting the money and then spending is not something which any of us even put on the table for consideration. So that is why I have made provision for large borrowings, with the tax buoyancy kept at a very conservative level, and with disinvestment, asset monetization and improved GST collection. I hope we will be looking at better ways of handling our finances.
In many ways, the economic survey was a harbinger of things to come. Your government is finally now going for aggressive growth without so much worrying about what the fiscal hawks would say. For a government which has been fiscally prudent and conservative, do you think this is some kind of a U-turn or a turning point in the way you look at the future?
No, I don't, because it is one thing to be conservative and fiscally prudent, and at normal times. Even now, if you notice, when people kept telling, oh, print money, you spend, you have to spend, and I also made a conscious statement that if I don't spend now, I will only be postponing the growth, and I have to spend. That is clearly a conscious statement that I made. So given the situation that we are in, the stimulus was absolutely necessary. quality expenditure is what we were looking for. And that is why when we've decided and when we've taken a call, I'm sure that because of the way in which we have designed it and also monitoring the qualitative expenditure that we are planning, it will definitely give us that required multiplier for the economy. And once the economy is into that virtuous cycle, income generation, revenue generation, and all of that will fall in place. So your fiscal prudence is still intact, and that is why I've given you a glide path.
Right.
Because I'm confident that this year I might have gone that far, but I can rein that back in.
But 4.5% in 25-26, given that we were hovering between 3 and 3.5 in the last couple of years, before the pandemic.
That's true, but the pandemic and its impact is something which we'll have to keep in mind for the duration it is going to take for it to come back to that kind of a buoyancy, for that level of growth. And I can't be overestimating the economy, and I don't think the economy is in a position to even heat or overheat. Those fears are not at all there, and therefore I have to give it a reasonable time, and I didn't grudge that.
Nirmala ji, by now we know what the government thinks of rating agencies like Moody's and Standard & Poor, of them being noisy, opaque and biased. But do you still feel that there could be a threat of a ratings downgrade, and how does that bother you, or if at all?
Let me put it this way. I don't want to say I'm not bothered. At the same time, I didn't let it bother me, because otherwise, even during the pandemic, a lot of people kept asking me, is the rating agency worry stopping you from spending? Now I am spending.
Yes.
So then or now, it is not that bother. But of course, by giving a glide path, by restraining too long, like the way in 2008, it was left open and there was no closing the doors.
Yes.
And as a result, you had all the taper tantrums, and the economy was still going through a big difficulty.
Yeah.
We've learnt lessons from that, and therefore I'm confident this will be appreciated by people who are discerning on these matters.
Let's go to some of the big bang announcements first. Here execution, as everyone is saying, will obviously be the key. Your sort of privatization drive almost has a Margaret Thatcher sort of ring around it. Fairly, good in intent, bold in intent, but execution will be key. For instance, I think the figure of 1.75 lakh crore is what we would have achieved. We would have in fact achieved 2,10,000 crore going by earlier estimates this year, but we scaled that down. Now the point is, how are we to be sure that this will definitely be achieved in the coming year?
Because I think, to be fair, the estimate made in July 2019, I wouldn't want to say it was an overestimate. We expected to do that much, but of course the economy slowed down. But of course the economy's difficulties in terms of demand slowing down, stock market also being tepid, it wouldn't have been right for me to say, oh no, but I've said it in budget, I have to sell it come what may. That wouldn't have been the best approach. It's all right, I did give an estimate. I was pulled up saying, oh, you overestimated, you couldn't achieve. The situation was such that the economy at that time was not in a position to receive all these privatization, although I did say it. But I am now also saying, because ultimately when you're using public money, you're selling public assets, can I be only, no, I've given a commitment, so I have to sell irrespective of what I get out of it? I am answerable to the Parliament. I have to make sure that it is sold at a price at which I can stand up with honesty and say, no, I've done the best on the job. So 2 lakhs couldn't be achieved. Now I am sounding conservative. I have to also make sure that these companies are able to catch the eye of the investor or the buyer so that they are sold at a reasonable price.
It was heartening for the markets to hear, your reiteration that it's going to be minimum government, maximum governance, and that the governments will get out of a few sectors. Do you remain completely committed to that?
100%, and that is why I said, instead of picking up on one after the other set of companies saying, oh, this is ready for sale, that is ready for sale, state it as a policy. that you will have only certain core sectors, even there you will have only bare minimum. Earlier somebody did ask me, but didn't you say during Atmanirbhar 4 at least? I am still saying not 4, it can even be lesser. Bare minimum is what I am talking about. And that is where when people question me, but public sector banks, yes, they are doing brilliantly for the very many causes for which government wants banks to function. They are also sitting over several CASA, the current account and savings account money, for which there is no demand in the areas in which the CASAs are coming in big numbers.
Yes.
There should be some synergy, and that is why we went about amalgamating banks. We want very many more SBIs, but that doesn't mean that the sentiment that, oh my God, there is a public sector bank and therefore I can't even touch it, can be the guiding principle. We want more public sector banks which are functionally strong, professionally managed, which can meet the demands of a growing aspirational India. We want such banks, and I don't think one or two just banks like that will be able to meet this growing demand for credit and growing demand for a varied reasons from the economy. But in the process, if I am going to be sitting around with such public sector banks which are just not in a mood or even in a position to stand up, is it right to pour taxpayers' money to such banks?
Absolutely.
Where there may be buyers who can buy it and run it efficiently. We want more efficient banks in the economy. I can't be sitting with a laggard and thinking that I am doing a favor to the economy. I want these banks to go out and be able to stand up there with private money coming in and be able to service our economy. That's why.
It's the one announcement that's really sent all banking stocks on fire, including the public sector banks. Now, is this the way forward for public sector banks, or is it that there will be some public sector banks and some will be privatized? You know, so you said 2 banks. You would like to know which banks they are.
We have not just named it. If I could name it even in the budget speech,
and how
I would have
soon
done.
would that happen?
I hope to do it all this year. The formulations have, we've started engaging with the Reserve Bank in a big way.
Now, the disinvestment target of 1.75 lakh crore, does that include everything, or is, you know, or LIC and others would be outside the purview of this?
Well, as LIC is an IPO, we'll have to see how it, we've only I've read out the names of those disinvestment for which cabinet approval has been taken.
And is that the figure of 1.75 lakh crore corresponding to?
Yes, in a way, yes.
So everything else would be outside the purview of that?
I wouldn't so put it in black and white.
Okay.
Broadly, yes.
But broadly, the ones announced today is where you hope to get maximum.
Largely.
You know, the much awaited development financial institution you announced today, again, could you give us some specifics other than, providing a capital of 20,000 crore? Any specifics, have you thought of the name, or when would it kick off?
Not yet. Not yet. In the sense, there are institutions already in the Government of India realm which we would want to use for this purpose, but not just for what they are now. We want it to be professionally run. We are giving them some money, but with which we are expecting to have 5 lakh crores within the next few years to be able to leverage their own funds and be able to get that kind of money. But I also underline the fact that I don't think, again I repeat this, for a growing aspirational India, one development finance institution can meet up with all the growing demands. And therefore, in the act that we will have to bring in, the amendments that I have to make to existing laws also, will have to have a provision for even private DFIs to come in.
That's interesting.
With that, I want private DFI, government funded DFI, all to compete. There's so much demand for development financing. I don't think it will be just one government institution to be able to match up with the demand. I am going to create space through law for even private institutions to come and do their own. Indian economy needs it all.
Yes, that's a big story. We'll move on to the asset reconstruction and management company that you have announced today. It's a path-breaking development. Can you tell us a little more about this bad bank, and will private sector also play a role here?
Yes, we've done it in sort of stages, in the sense, first with the RBI being with us, because this has been going on as a discussion with them. what we want to do is to have a kind of a holding company which will, with a formulation given, take those assets, bad assets from the bank, from various banks, and put it into that holding company. It will have some participation from the government, but largely it will be the IBA itself doing it.
Oh,
so that holding company would then spruce up the accounts, understand where the asset valuation is, and because year after year after year we are giving provisioning, these banks have already lost a certain net worth of these assets which are with them. They have already taken probably in paper a haircut, but they have not realized anything out of sitting over those assets for years, but providing for it in their bank books. Now, once these assets are culled out and given to this holding company, they shall be able to do some kind of a, clearly making sit up,
sure,
and then call for private sector asset reconstruction companies, AIFs, all to come and look at what they want to do with an asset which is like that with them and sell off the asset. And even at that, whatever is realized, the banks will have to get some part of what they have to get, in the sense with the due haircut taken, they will also get something from that realized monies. So the bank essentially therefore gets back what it should get back, and ideally, because they are not in a position to, or they don't have the wherewithal to deal with such assets, because they are running the bank on an everyday basis.
Yes.
They don't have with them such experts who can understand what it is to deal with asset reconstruction. And these assets are sitting there languishing, not getting sold off. Now with this holding company and with also the market coming in, those assets are going to find some kind of a buyer, and the banks therefore forever can get out of that situation and realize whatever little they can. So this is a workable solution that we are bringing in. The banks are all on board. We've had extensive consultation with them and with the Reserve Bank of India. So there will be a proper institutional framework through which this will happen in an absolutely transparent way.
Okay. You are expecting tax revenues to grow by 15% to 15.45 lakh crore. For this to happen, the Indian companies will have to grow at the same pace as they were, perhaps much more than they were pre-pandemic. Are you confident of that? Do you think that we have turned around?
I think the Indian industry has also slowly revealed that the corporate tax rate cuts have also helped them, although it happened pre-pandemic.
Yes.
Now, many of them have also offloaded their debts. They are looking at now expansion. Expansion is happening in core sector industries. There are also a lot of pickup in exports. People are seeing it's possible to invest and grow. Yes. So I guess the private sector's spirit to come and invest and start widening their domain, together with also raising funds. For instance, we are working on the listing, the Morgan Stanley index, on which the ministry has worked now for some time, and I expect some kind of a resolution this summer. And if after that companies can go about raising, they automatically will receive, now that they are part of that larger index, they will receive funds, and with that I think there will be greater investable fund available.
Nirmala ji, there is a little bit of confusion around the agri-infra cess. What really was the idea behind this?
I'll just give you a broad principle.
Yeah.
Many of the customs duty, the items selected for it, are those which can afford to pay the duties as it exists today. But even then, even as we talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat, intention being that imports should happen at least for those sectors where the raw materials are coming from abroad. So, for instance, if you were paying a BCD of 12%, something like that in gold for instance, we brought the BCD down to, let us say, 7%, and after that we just added 3 to 4% of this cess, which we want essentially to be carving out from that customs duty only for the purpose of funding infrastructure in agriculture. The end of the story in each of these items on which I have imposed the cess, the agricultural infrastructure development cess, is the end consumer or the importer is not going to pay 1 rupee more. The reduction in customs and the imposition of the cess, infrastructure cess, net is not going to burden the consumer or the importer. But why did I have to do it? I had to do it because I wanted to make sure that the fund for funding infra in agri is got a head on which I am earning certain amount, and that can be used. Otherwise, the BCD goes into the account, all right. And for instance, in the case of the petrol and diesel where this duty applies, we have applied it on the additional excise duty, which is purely central government's money. It's not that excise which goes into devolution, center has a component, state has a component.
So the states will not get shortchanged in this?
No, first of all, the money that I am collecting through this cess for agri infrastructure is also going to have to be given to the states for building their own infrastructure. But at least I am apportioning it for a particular capital expenditure. In the case of petroleum and diesel, the center as it is was collecting only fixed amounts. It is the states which are collecting ad valorem on the basic rate.
Yes.
So the amount that I am getting as a fixed amount is on the additional surcharge, additional excise duty, which is purely a central government's money.
Okay. You've also increased custom duties in some key items, and you've said that 400 customs exemptions will be reviewed. Is it aimed at reducing our dependence on imports from China?
No, not necessarily. I have looked at 400 notifications, for instance, which were issued in 92, 93, 95, some even probably just earlier than that, and which have just remained there. So in the process of looking at all these notifications, we realized many of them are just there, continuing to be there, and even if the need is no longer felt, but are there. So I said, this is no way of running the ministry, let us please look at it. And in fact, last time you would remember, I had asked for public opinion through crowdsourcing to tell me what reforms can be done in customs.
Right.
A lot of people gave me inputs also. So in that context, I said, please pick up all these, put it to discussion, let stakeholders come and tell us, and that is why I have bought time till end August, saying all of the comments are welcome on these. Do you want this to continue even though it has been there since, let us say, 93, 94, 95?
Yes.
If it is got to be, all right, we will do it, but that will be effective from 1st October. Okay. But I have also brought this, therefore I don't, in order that we don't repeat the same error, any notification from now will automatically expire after 2 years, unless in the meanwhile people have asked for renewing it, we will renew it. From March, after the time of that notification expires, the March after that, it will disappear. Otherwise, we are just sitting with all these ancient papers, all of which are effective in the ground. Somebody can somewhere use his discretion and say, but sorry, this is the notification. It leads to a lot of discretion.
Yeah. Today in your budget speech, I noticed that you made a strong point on MSP. You were very cogent, very articulate about how the government has only increased MSP on farm produce over the last few years. Manifold. And that's a point you made. Why do you think that farmers doubt the intent of this government?
That is surprising to me, actually, because if our MSP performance is undoubtedly steadily going up from 2014 till today, to doubt the intent of the government, and that is where I feel I honestly want them to come on to the table, be at the table and talk it out with Narendra Singh Tomar, the minister, and specifically tell us where your grievances are. The PM himself has said that he is willing to look at any modification that they want and talk about it. I honestly want them to come and specify where does the problem lie. MSP, I'm telling you with data. I'm telling in the House. I'm giving you government information in the House. You have questions on it, please do come and talk. We are willing. And that's where I wish talks continue.
Do you think the protests are mostly stoked by opposition parties, by people from outside rather than real farmers? I mean, is that the feeling?
I honestly don't know who's stoking it, but I honestly also equally know that farmers, at least those who are present there, at least some of whom are farmers, are probably misguided. I want them to talk. I want them to please talk. I want them to talk on particular points of concern, not have a, oh no, this is not right. Tell us what in this is not right. We're willing to concede.
Yes. What makes you really lose sleep? What are the biggest risks in this budget that you would sort of worry about? I mean, is there anything that could go wrong in your assumptions that you would be cautious about?
I think I'll be foolish to say anything on this score, because who anticipated a corona in February 2020 when we gave the budget in all positive, with all optimism? So
we can't see black swan events, I mean, I'm sure, but otherwise you think these budget estimates
we've made an honest attempt.
Nirmala ji, I often wonder, if this government goes for bold reforms of the kind you've done today, you are called a suit boot ki sarkar. If you don't, the industry calls you a socialistic regime. So in a way, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So how do you really marry the two sort of divergent aspirations of the people at large?
Yes, there is a very fine balancing act to do there. I think the Prime Minister is a very clear-headed leader. He never misses out on what has to be done to the weaker sections, never misses out on things which have to be done for the poor and needy. Otherwise, would you think after having announced a lockdown, within 48 hours, the Garib Kalyan package was announced. And I know how much our bank employees struggled during that COVID time. And in fact, they were all exposed. That time, nobody knew to what extent anyone can go out. Yes. They were all there. That is why in my speech I did say milk vendors, vegetable vendors, electricity pole workers, bank employees, firemen, policemen, armed forces, all of them did a spectacular job using the technology and giving DBT. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to reach all those deserving people about whom the PM was very keen, said, I want them to be given all the basics, food, cooking, fuel and some money, so that they are not worried. Put it into their bank accounts. So with PM conscious of India's diverse population, where the poor are struggling, the employment EPFO related announcement earlier, where we have said for the next 2 years we'll pay the PF for those registered companies to take back workers who they have thrown out. It's a very clear sign. So the balance that India needs in not going to this extreme or that extreme, socialistic totally or completely open market, that balance is what the PM is constantly working on, and he'll never miss out on that.
You have got, the budget has got rave reviews from one section of, section of captains of the industry, the economy. The opposition parties have, criticized the budget in some senses. I wanted to ask you a question on growth. Are you confident that we will be able to grow in the next few years in the way the economic survey pegs the growth at 11% of, GDP growth at 11%? And is it sustainable over the next few years? The former finance minister and your predecessor says that thinking of a V-shaped recovery is absolutely vain, and predicting it is vanity. So how do you react to this criticism?
First of all, I've never gotten into the alphabet soup business of V, K, anything else, U or whatever. I've not even bothered to talk about it because I don't want to get into that discussion. My job here is to make sure the Indian entrepreneurial motivation, the drive that Indian businesses have, small, medium, large, all of them have. Otherwise, do you think, just even when there is a partial unlocking happening, people have gone about their business, otherwise do you think this kind of GST numbers would come now? So, I don't believe that I am talking about a V-shaped growth or X-shaped growth for people to judge me. My business here, it is to take care that I facilitate the Indian entrepreneur, the Indian migrant worker, the Indian workers who want skill, the Indian businessmen who want to run their business and take care of their family. It's my business to help them. The economy will get triggered based on their hard work. I don't for a minute think it's me sitting in Delhi, North Block, to do it. So let there not be any confusion about that. It is the spirit of the Indian entrepreneur which is growing and which is delivering, and that is why I took the example of the cricket team in Australia.
That is very interesting.
If they could perform when no one in the cricket world thought Indians can perform, when you had the typical Australian sledging happening,
yes,
but they withstood all and showed performance. That's pure India, the Indian youth, which just want that little help from you and they'll do it all for themselves. So I'm sorry, I don't think I believe in that, but at the same time I believe that I'm here to facilitate.
One last question, Nirmala ji. A lot of people today have compared your budget to that of Manmohan Singh's budget of 1991. My simple question is, how would Nirmala Sitharaman want to be remembered as? A bold reformer or a champion of inclusive growth?
I don't know. I have not applied my mind to that at all yet.
Very well done today, Nirmala ji. Thank you so much for giving us time and giving Network 18 this first exclusive to a private channel after your budget speech. On behalf of Network 18 and our viewers, I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
കേന്ദ്ര ബജറ്റ് അവതരണത്തിന് ശേഷം നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് 18 എഡിറ്റർ രാഹുൽ ജോഷിക്ക് നൽകിയ അഭിമുഖത്തിന്റെ തത്സമയ സംപ്രേഷണമായിരുന്നു. കേന്ദ്ര ധനമന്ത്രി നിർമ്മല സീതാരാമൻ സംസാരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു. സ്വകാര്യ മേഖലയിൽ നിന്ന് നിക്ഷേപത്തിന് വലിയ തോതിൽ മുന്നോട്ട് വരുന്നുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളൊരു പ്രതീക്ഷയാണ് ഇന്ത്യ പങ്കുവച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത് എന്ന എഡിറ്ററുടെ ചോദ്യത്തിന് ഉത്തരമായി പ്രതികരിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി നിർമ്മല സീതാരാമൻ.